Welcome to The Revealing. I'm again your host, Pavarotti. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to go into a lot more detail about the organizations that's involved in this, that law enforcement is targeting, so that you have a better understanding of who's really behind this event. And once again, I'm not here to slander anybody. This is just pure speculation based on the media narrative and the narrative that a lot of you at home have investigated. So I'm not going to use any names in this. So this is just for fun, but I do want people to really understand the details involved in something like this so that they can have a clear perspective of what they're watching. Okay, so let's talk first of all about what I'm calling an organization. When you have a town like Moscow, Idaho, well, that town is a college town. It does have a college. It does have a lot of other residents as well. And I haven't dived into the numbers. Maybe I'll do that for you. But I imagine that since they have enacted a drug task force, that the drug arrests in that area are significant. They wouldn't put together a drug task force if it wasn't. In fact, a drug task force, just so you understand, it is a specific group of law enforcement personnel, usually consisting of some detectives, undercover personnel, as well as some uniformed officers that are assigned specifically to a task. So once a task force is formed, they have one task, the task force. And their task is to put a dent in the drug crimes in their specific county. Now, a drug task force may operate in a county or possibly two counties or maybe even sometimes three counties. They call that a tri-county task force. Typically doesn't get bigger than three counties because that's too large of an area for them to adequately investigate. The drug task force is going to target low-level dealers, mid-level distributors. Their ultimate goal is to climb up the chain of command to the people who are actually operating an organization in their area. Now, there's also people I'm going to refer to as independents. Okay, so an independent is an individual who will go to another city or county, purchase a large amount of drugs, come back to their county, and then work as typically a low-level distributor / dealer. Okay, now, although they will focus in on individuals such as this, they do want to make that arrest. It's not their ultimate goal, because once they make that arrest, climbing up the chain stops with that arrest. They're kind of the highest level in that particular scenario, because the task force is not allowed to operate outside of the counties that they're assigned to. So if somebody's going to another county to make a purchase, then all the task force at that point could do is refer the information they have to the county that person's traveling to. So they're not really much of a use in that specific scenario. What they are a use in, though, is things that are occurring in their counties. And they go about this type of operation in a few different ways. One way is by using people who are arrested on low-level drug possession charges, and that's 90% of the arrests that are made in the drug world when as it relates to law enforcement. They're going to pull somebody over or have somebody involved in some type of incident, and they're going to have a small quantity of drugs on them, and they will arrest them. And the drug task force will then get with those individuals, try to scare them as much as they can, maybe offer them some type of relief from charges for them to give them information, or even possibly set up people higher in the chain than they are, which in most cases would be a dealer, a low-level dealer. So you'll have a low-level dealer. You have the drug user, obviously, down here, the low-level dealer. Then you have a distributor. And the distributors are involved in higher quantities. They supply the dealers. And then above the distributor is what I'm going to refer to as the house. Okay, the house has the large amount of drugs that supply the distributors, and they also employ all the upper-level personnel. This could be anything from the couriers that bring the large quantities in from wherever they get the large quantities from. They travel from there to the house with the large quantities. They're also going to have other personnel such as intelligence. They'll have people in the community that are paid off that, perhaps are in law enforcement, in city council positions. You have people that can do things for them and keep eyes off of them, and also be able to give them the intelligence they need to know when law enforcement is moving in on them or getting close. They would also have attorneys that would represent them if something happened, attorneys that assist in laundering profits made from the drug trade, and they would also have attorneys for intelligence. When people are arrested and they are talking, they would want some attorneys that represent those people to be able to give them the information that they need to know who's talking so that they can adjust their operations accordingly. So the task force will take the low-level drug users who are arrested, try to move up the chain to the distributors, arrest them, try to get them to turn on people higher than them, and they just continue to move up the chain. And if that chain of that organization is in their county, then that's a big focus for them. Now, there may be multiple larger organizations working in the county that are in the same business, but their specific goal is to investigate as much as they can to get up that chain to try to take those people down. So the mothers of the two young ladies that lived at that Idaho house were both, as I mentioned before, arrested. And I'm going to assume that their position in this organization was the courier positions, because they were both arrested, separate occasions. I'm not saying that they even knew each other, but they were arrested doing the same thing, transporting a large quantity of drugs from one area to the counties involved in Moscow, Idaho. And when they were arrested, they were charged with some pretty significant offenses. And the attorney that represented both of them, again assigned by the public defender's office, probably requested the cases because she's there for intelligence, and she wanted to represent these people so that the organization would know what's going on with them. Are they talking? Are they not talking? What are they saying? And that would be the person that would be able to provide that information. So with these ladies waiting on their court date, that once again was, both of their court dates were, I believe, they were both coming up a few days prior to the events that happened in the Idaho case. So they may have kept their mouth shut for a long time waiting on that trial date, and as it was coming due, they got scared and they tried to make a deal. They tried to get their charges reduced to maybe provide a little information on that organization. And their attorney would absolutely have that information. The attorney would pass it along to the organization. The organization would look to send a message. Now, with both of their mothers being involved in the drug trade in Moscow, Idaho, and we can be fairly certain that they were involved in the drug trade in Moscow, Idaho, because they were both charged in the same county in Moscow, Idaho. They're both being represented by the same attorney. So if they're involved in the drug trade in that town, and both of their daughters are in college in that town, and you can draw as many lines as you want to, from the mothers to the daughters. I mean, everybody says that house was a party house. Where were they getting their drugs? They may have been at the bottom of the food chain. So I would assume that organization would know people that were at the bottom of the food chain, that probably spent a lot of time in that house, that could provide them with intelligence that they needed to carry out the task that they had, which was to send the message to those mothers. How are they going to send the message? Doing the worst thing that they could possibly do, which is to eliminate their daughters. So once they made that deal with law enforcement, the word was sent to the organization from that attorney. The organization set somebody in motion to send the message. And I believe that person was Brian Kohberger. Now, Mr. Kohberger, again, let's talk about him for a minute. He's a criminal psychologist. Okay? I've already discussed in a previous video how many years of education, and somebody left in the comments student loans. Yeah, the cost of that education was significant. The dedication to that education was very significant. We're talking 8 years of higher education to have a criminal psychologist degree, criminal psychology, a PhD, to be a doctor in criminal psychology. What purpose could you possibly come up with to invest all that time and money to have that type of occupation? Because I can't think of many occupations that actually go along with criminal psychologists. If you can, then I'd be interested in hearing what you have to say. But again, the only occupations I can think of is behavioral sciences unit for the FBI, maybe Homeland Security. Those positions, I imagine, are few and far between. And coming straight out of school with a PhD in criminal psychology is probably not adequate to fill one of those positions. I imagine experience in law enforcement would be necessary. But if you think about the knowledge acquired in an education such as that, and you begin to think about how you could apply that in this manner, what kind of knowledge would Kohberger have to be able to apply in a case like this, to be able to carry out the task and potentially not get caught? I mean, a criminal psychologist would obviously be educated on law enforcement personnel's tactics, their methods of operation as far as investigating, gathering evidence, but also forming a profile for the assailant that committed the acts. In fact, he would know exactly what to do to try to point law enforcement in a completely different direction than an individual such as himself. Somebody with that type of education would absolutely want this crime scene to look like an incel stalker who hated women, focused in on these young ladies, and then in a serial killer fashion blindly went in and pulled a Ted Bundy and left and wanted law enforcement to be thinking that's what happened and move in that direction. The last thing that he would want them to think is it was a message sent from an organization to keep somebody from talking, because that would send up way too many red flags for law enforcement, and that would get them on their heels on guess who? The organization that was involved. Now, I believe over the course of the investigation, probably pretty early, that people were talking to law enforcement. The task force was probably, and I believe I've seen a video of some interesting individuals, maybe with cowboy hats, that at one point after these crimes happened went in to do a investigation into the house, and they didn't look like normal, law enforcement personnel, normal investigators. They looked kind of like what I would expect a drug task force to look like. And they went into the house and did a brief investigation and then left, and some reporters tried to ascertain who they were, and they didn't want to say, which again makes me believe that they were part of that drug task force. So the information law enforcement obviously ascertained fairly quickly was the true reason for this crime. And again, that's why I believe it was the second or the third day that the chief of police came out and gave a press conference and said, the community is safe. Nobody worry. This was a targeted attack. Nobody else is in danger. Now, if this was a crazed, stalking, serial killing maniac who randomly picked out some victims and broke into their house randomly and assaulted them to the point to where they're no longer with us, well, that would be real cause for the community to be worried, to say the least. Not, it's a targeted attack, nobody worry, everything's fine. Because that's exactly what they said, and they said what they meant too, because nobody else was in danger. It was a targeted attack, and they know that. How they got to Kohberger, that remains to be seen. My thoughts are that Kohberger did drive his vehicle to the scene. He wisely turned his phone off, because if you watch any episode of First 48, the first thing they do is take the suspect's cell phone. They pull up cell records, who'd they call, who'd they text, pull up their area locators, where were they at, and with the phone off or in airplane mode, none of that's really going to be available. All they can tell is, well, he was in the general area. The phone pinged off of this tower or this tower, but not like if the phone was on. They could tell exactly where he went, and how long he stayed there, and where he went after that. And they didn't have that information. So I believe he did drive his car. They seen his car on a few videos away from the house, figured out probably from some informants that it was him, and then they focused their investigation in on him. But in the end, the organization is responsible for this. Kohberger's just the hand that dealt the cards. And I've had some other comments that Kohberger doesn't seem like the hitman character in a lot of the movies that you see. He seems more like the American Psycho character. Well, he does kind of resemble Christian Bale, I guess, in that character, but I'll give you another movie to watch, and I assure you, you go watch this movie, and then you relate the hitman character in this movie to Kohberger, and other than the fact that he's a billionaire and he has some pretty attractive, well, he has a pretty attractive woman that wants to be with him, I think you can see where I'm going with the Kohberger character. It's uncanny, and that movie is starring The Rock. It's called Faster. Came out a few years back. Give that movie a watch and then think about Mr. Kohberger, and I think that'll open your eyes. So that's all I'm going to say on this video. I still have one more that's coming, and the last one I'm going to save all the best for last. But again, I'm just painting a picture of a story that possibly happened. Again, I'm Pavarotti. Check it out.